Welcome to After the Session, Season 0, Episode 4, with Dr. Tim Mullen. First off, before I talk to you a little bit about Dr. Mullen, let me begin by saying it's my intention to occasionally bring guests onto the ATS podcast that are outside the scope of what you might expect to hear on a show similar to this. I'm interested in having other perspectives from individuals on the exterior of our field, on the edges of our field, or in the case of Dr. Mullen, an individual who inspires me creatively in different ways than a musician or a producer or an engineer or songwriter. And now, for the sake of framing this particular episode, I should probably let you know that I'm not just fascinated with the art of making music, but also in art as a whole, and technology to some extent as well. And thus, anything that incorporates tech as a medium for the message, I'm totally into. So, as a result of this, for quite some time, I've been asking myself a very specific question in relation to this. The question is, what is the next evolution of the music experience? I think that's a big deal, because we haven't seen in my opinion, we really haven't seen an evolution in the music experience since like 1981, maybe, when MTV went on the air and the music video really kind of came into its own. So that was a long time ago, and I don't feel that we've seen a major evolution in the way in the way we experience music since then. But of course, you're going to say that's an entirely different discussion. I don't need to go down that road. Let me continue by saying, in my quest to define what I think the next evolution is, I happened across an AES panel in 2014 called "The Future is Now: Mind-Controlled Interactive Music." And as often happens with me at AES, I got stuck in a meeting and missed the panel, but I was able to find the audio recording from the panel and download it and listen to it after the fact. And it was at that point that I was absolutely certain that Dr. Mullen needed to be a guest on this podcast. The bio on Tim from the AES website states, I'm going to read this: Dr. Tim Mullen first obtained bachelor's degrees from UC Berkeley in computer science and cognitive neuroscience with highest honors, followed by MS and PhD degrees in cognitive neuroscience from UC San Diego at the Institute for Neural Computation. An interest in human-machine interfaces began with research at Helen Wills Neuroscience Institute and was later expanded at Palo Alto Research Center, where he developed novel applications of wearable brain-computer interface technology for human-computer interaction. Let me read that again. Where he developed novel applications of wearable brain-computer interface technology for human-computer interaction. Well, what does that mean? I think many things, but most importantly to me, it means that Dr. Mullen is on the forefront of using the brain and BCMI interfaces to create music and music-oriented art. Oh my God, that's amazing. So, in summary, when Tim isn't hacking the brain, running his company, he's doing music and he's doing art, and often he's kind of combining all of this together into some pretty wild projects. So do me and Tim a favor and check the description of the podcast for links to some of his projects. I think they're a bit too numerous and a bit too, not complex, but a bit too complex to really go into now, and I'm trying to keep this intro somewhat short. So I think you guys should check out links to what he's working on now. I think you'll be as inspired as I was. All right. Moving forward, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. If you haven't already, you can go to iTunes on your phone or whatever and go into the search and type "After the Session," and you'll see it pop up, and you can click or touch subscribe or punch subscribe with your fist, or throw your phone against the wall and hope that subscribe will be hit in the process, or you could do, just gently click subscribe. That might work as well. So do that. And if you want to get in touch with me, at Ears Cummings on Twitter, afterthesession@gmail.com. That's about it. Oh, and while you're in iTunes, why don't you rate the podcast? I think that would be awesome. All right. After the session, Season 0, Episode 4 with Dr. Tim Mullen. Dr. Tim Mullen, thank you for being on the podcast. Appreciate you being here. We've been chatting a little bit before we started rolling, and you're based here in San Diego, which makes it uber convenient for me to have you here. I'm just stoked. I have so many questions for you, man. I'm so excited to have you. I had mentioned to you just a few minutes ago how I missed your AES panel, but I was able to download the presentation on audio and sort of get the general idea without the visuals. It was really cool. You do a lot of different things, but maybe rather than trying to have me explain a little bit about what you do and what you've done, maybe you could explain it better yourself.
Sure. I mean, but where to start?
I know, right? Do you want to talk about, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
You go.
Well, I could, we were talking a little bit before this about just my upbringing, roaming around the world. And, I've spent a lot of time in my early years traveling, actually, as a volunteer worker.
Really?
Yeah. My parents were international volunteer workers for their whole lives almost.
Okay. Is that why you traveled around so much?
That's how I got around. Yeah, exactly. My dad was a naval officer, and then in the 60s, he sort of struck out and decided to... That's cool. Kind of, this is kind of the new hippie movements, and he was very interested in what was going on outside the U.S. and got out there and then never really returned.
Non-traditional upbringing.
Absolutely, yeah,
That's
very
awesome.
non-traditional. So I think that kind of set the stage for my more eclectic meandering through academia and arts and the various other things that I gravitate towards. But at some point, I moved here to the U.S. in 2001, and I started the educational path. So, after some meandering there, I did start an academic path, starting at Berkeley, which was a great place. And, I originally went to Berkeley because I was into computer programming. And I envisioned Berkeley as being just thick with anarchists and hippies. And, and maybe it was that way back in the 60s, but it's a little different now.
Yeah.
But it was still a pretty cool experience.
Yeah.
And
did you undergrad there?
I did my undergrad there. And so I kind of started in artificial intelligence, and I was interested in human-computer interaction and really trying to understand how we could build better interfaces. But through that, I started getting really interested in the brain. And that kind of led me to neurosciences. And so I did a couple degrees there, focusing on computer science and cognitive science, and then that kind of led me to my master's and my PhD.
I just looked over at Doug because he just said, I did a couple degrees there. Did a couple degrees there.
Yeah, well, once you're doing one, throwing another one
I did one
on
degree
seems like
in my life.
Once you're already sweating it out in the halls of, Soda Hall in computer science, your life is over anyway. So you might as well just stack it on.
What do you like about it? Like, what turns you on to the brain and computer and human interaction? Like, what?
Oh, well, I mean, human-computer interaction always fascinated me in some ways for its artistic elements. I mean, I think that was what I loved most about it.
Because you're a musician too. You do a lot of music
right.
stuff,
So
obviously.
I'm a musician. I grew up in a very musical family. We all played instruments. I was, singing. We had a little. Actually, we kind of sang for our supper legitimately as kids a lot of times.
Okay, cool.
On street corners, had the guitar case out. I played the maracas and, danced around a bit and sang. And my brothers, they all played different instruments. And so we always had that component, and I was always very interested in the arts.
Okay.
But never really professionally. And I think, computer science or human-computer interaction, to me, computer science is about creating. It's art, really, in many ways, You're building virtual things, but, you build things with an aesthetic in mind, and building a cool interface is about, in as much as about, it's about the functionality and all that, but also the aesthetics of it. That feeling you get when you work with a really nice interface. It's beautiful, it looks good, the icons are great.
I totally understand working with digital audio workstations all the time.
Exactly.
Staring at a computer screen and those interfaces all
so there's
day
that
long.
that design aspect. So there's that, but then there's also this question of how do how do you develop interfaces that adapt to the human, or that somehow understand you enough to appeal to that aesthetic, to make, they should configure themselves to what you want, so that you naturally interact with them as we interact with objects in the world, or even with other humans. We're pretty good at reading each other, and at least some of us, who are, me not always, but we try to, understand each other's body language and react in a way that, makes it possible to communicate. So, I was really interested in how we could endow machines with that capability.
Bidirectional communication, so to speak.
Right. Her. Have you seen her?
I haven't yet. I haven't like.
Or, there's not an interface there. Actually, it's a disembodied voice.
Yeah, but I got to see that. That's on my list, man. That's on my list.
Right. So, through that, that's how I originally got pretty interested in the brain. And then the brain just blew me away in its complexity and its beauty. The mathematics of how the brain operates, we're just scratching the surface of it, but it's also, you can see as a very visual, beautiful thing. You look at neural networks and you look at the patterns that are generated by the brain, waves of activity propagating through the brain, pulses of activity, rich structure. It can be seen as a very visual, beautiful, artistic thing.
Yeah.
And I think that probably is one of the things that most excites me too about studying the brain, is just appreciating that.
Yes, in your studies you find a art and beauty in that.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
I think it's fundamental to any discipline. There's always the aesthetic element. Even like mathematics has been famous. A beautiful equation, E equals mc squared, a beautiful equation. Why? What's beautiful about it? It's a few letters, but behind that, there's so much stuff, so much richness that is even hard to articulate. What that simple equation means, and even if you don't understand any of the maths, you ask anyone, they have some appreciation for it. Whether it's Einstein with his crazy hair, or or just the cosmos, or whatever it is. But then there's the elegance of just the simplicity of the equation, and how much it explains in such a simple and elegant line of symbols.
If only everything worked out like that.
Yeah, absolutely. But usually it's not that way.
So, again, we were talking a little bit ago, I think before, I don't know if we caught this on the recording yet or not, but yeah, I missed the AES conversation, but that conversation was about, what was the name of the panel? Do you remember?
The Future is Now, Mind-Controlled Interactive Music.
Okay.
And this was organized by a good friend of mine, Richard Warp, and he and I have worked together, on off and on collaborations for years. And he's a composer, and he did his master's at Goldsmiths, really looking at how computer technology and biotech could be used to create interesting new music. And I've been evolving in the same space for a number of years, and so we first met in San Francisco and did some cool performances together. Using in the beginning, we were using things like GSR, galvanic skin response, measuring skin conductivity, which is related to it's really related to brain activity, in the sense that as you, say, increase your stress levels, that changes your skin conductivity, and you can record that by putting a sensor on the finger. And this has been known for many years, over 100 years, this phenomenon. But and the use of it to measure affect or emotion dates back 50 years. But what we were doing is hooking that up then to create interesting visuals and use that in an improvisational context. And so that was our first kind of performance together. And we evolved, separately and together for many years. And he organized this great panel, and we were just kind of just interacting and talking about where are we now in brain-computer music interfaces. That's the kind of the catch-all term for this, and where's it all going?
Brain-computer music interfaces.
Exactly. Yeah. More colloquially, people call them like thought-controlled devices or whatever, but that's a bit of a misnomer because, we don't even really know what a thought is, and much less how exactly to detect that in the brain.
Can you talk a little bit about what a brain music interface might be?
Sure. How about if I tell you about the very first instance of a brain-computer music interface? This was by a famous artist named Alvin Lucier, and Alvin, he's a pioneer of experimental music. And in 1965, he did a famous piece called Music for Solo Performer. And this was particularly famous because it was the first, even though people previously had sonified brain activity, so they had recorded activity inside a brain and then translating it to sound to hear sort of the sound of neurons in the brain. Nobody had really done this in a performance context. And so what he did is he recorded So let me dial a little bit back first and talk about this thing called the alpha rhythm. The alpha rhythm is it's a rhythmic electrical discharge that occurs in the brain, and it's generated by neurons, and it happens all throughout the brain. Neurons are little cells in the brain, kind of the fundamental unit of computation. And when you relax or change your kind of state of awareness of the outside world, you can increase or decrease this rhythm. And so what Alvin did is he recorded his alpha rhythm while he was sitting in a chair, very, kind of relaxing, going into almost a trance-like state, closing his eyes, relaxing, trying to get into this, what he called the alpha state. And then he recorded the electrical signals from his brain and transduced that to basically resonate. He actually played it directly through speakers to resonate a series of percussive instruments. So you could hear the sort of resonances of the brain, right?
Okay.
And that was the first instance of a brain-computer music interface, but this was before computers really existed. So you can think of it as an analog version of that, right?
Yep.
But this has now been, this analog interface that he produced has now been replaced with exceedingly more complex computer tools that can take signals from the brain, understand what they mean or what they represent, or in some way translate them into another representation, and then make sound out of that, or music. So you can essentially hear what a person is in some sense of thinking, or what their body is doing. And that's a BCMI.
Okay.
That's a long version of it.
No, but okay, yeah. So
Yes, please.
you want one of those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take a couple of
So
those.
I've seen examples of brain interfaces currently.
Yeah.
So I know what those look like. Maybe really quickly in like a couple of sentences, what is a brain control interface?
So,
in the modern
brain-computer
sense.
interface.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Brain-computer interface.
A brain-computer interface is any device by which a user, this is how it's classically defined, by which a user can form an intention, and that intention is carried out through a computer program that directly records signals from that person's brain and translates it into an action.
Okay.
So an example would be controlling a prosthetic arm. That's a classic example. You're not using your normal arms. You're not using your muscles. You're using a new sensory path, basically a new motor output pathway, a new channel of communication.
Right.
Where the robotic arm directly links to your brain.
And there have been leaps and bounds and progress in that feat.
There have been. And actually the definition has changed. So that's the classic definition, but we broaden the definition of a brain-computer interface to also mean any interface between a computer system and a neural signal, whereby the computer system is decoding states, unobserved states, inside the person's brain. So that could be an emotional state or a cognitive state. So for instance, when I get upset or angry, if that can be detected by a computer by recording my brain activity, then that would be an example of a brain-computer interface.
Okay.
What type of processing power is behind this idea?
Well, it's anything from very simple transforms, like a Fourier transform, which you guys use a lot in music or audio engineering, to very computationally intensive machine learning approaches that require stacks of servers to compute.
Machine learning approaches.
Yeah, machine learning is AI.
Yeah.
Using AI, basically, to solve the problem.
So it's my understanding that we've gotten to a point now where there are consumer kind of versions of interfaces. Is that the case?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are we right on the cusp of some changes with this stuff in
We
terms
are,
of
yeah. Well,
the average person having access to some of this technology and being able to incorporate it into, obviously I'm thinking about music, but I'm sure obviously there's a lot of other places you could incorporate it into video games, and music production.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're on the cusp of a lot of things right now. One of the things that we're on the cusp of is an explosion of wearable sensing. So, you've got your Fitbits and you've got your new Apple smartwatches and such. And those are examples of wearable computers. The same technology that's made it possible to have those miniaturized devices makes it possible to have small devices that record your brain activity too, and that you can do that when you're on the go, and you can do that cheaply. So the hardware is now inexpensive. So that technology is now available, and it's getting better every day. And so we are on the cusp of something very interesting there. This is what we in the research domain we typically refer to as consumer neurotechnology.
Consumer neurotechnology.
As opposed to research neurotechnology. And mostly
Right.
that implies a difference in the quality of the sensor. So for research purposes, we care very much about very accurate
Quality and
recordings. Quality
accuracy.
matters, right?
Right.
For consumer applications, it may not matter quite as much. So if you're creating a interesting piece of performance art, you can accept a bit of noise, and you don't want to be spending $100,000 for your sensor. You'd rather buy it for $200 and
Yeah.
do something cool with it, or buy 50 of them and strap them onto 50 people and do something really cool with that.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So the availability of this tech at a low price point and at a pretty high degree of quality has really allowed us to have all kinds of new applications that were not possible before.
Wow, that's really neat. I've seen some pictures of the some of the less expensive ones, and I was kind of Googling and researching before our conversation. I noticed that some are they're like different channels, like 5-channel.
Oh yeah, they go from 1 channel to 128 channels typically. So consumer EEG systems typically range from 1 electrode to about 16.
Okay.
And
Each one of those electrodes measures a specific
area
impulse.
of the brain
Okay.
typically. So they'll generally be spatially arranged over your brain, because what they're doing is they're like, think of them as, this is a totally crude analogy that a neuroscientist would kick my ass. I'll kick myself, my own ass for it. But
No, that's what we need, though. That's what we need.
But, it's
talking
just
to
like,
Doug
it's like
and
each
me
of them
here.
is like a little microphone. Think of it like that.
Perfect.
So imagine that each neuron was a little guy shouting. So, basically in the brain, what you've got are billions of little voices all shouting, all these neurons. And each neuron is saying, some of them are saying the same thing. They're shouting together. They're kind of chanting, Others are saying something completely different. And all of that's getting, propagated up to your sensors, which are like, think of them as microphones. But imagine that this microphone is, imagine that the person with the voice is like on Earth and the microphone's on Pluto. That's the scale at which we're talking about. Even though it
Right.
seems it's very close, the loudness of the voices is so small that little distance of even a few inches matters a lot. Okay.
Okay.
So what you need is a lot of microphones, basically. The more microphones you have, the better you can tease apart all the different voices by using signal processing techniques. And also, different voices are like in different parts of the brain, you've got different conversations happening. And so if you're interested in knowing, was it this part of the brain that was saying this or computing this, or was it this part of the brain? You need to have sensors that are positioned over different parts of the skull to pick up that activity. And the farther away a sensor is from the source,
more noise you have.
the more noise you have. So
We're talking signal to noise.
yes, exactly.
Aren't
Yeah,
we?
that's
Yeah.
right. So there is a lot of analogies to what you might do in music, and actually we apply a lot of the same algorithms used in sound engineering to get rid of noise and to figure
Okay.
out where sound's coming from.
Cool.
In neuroscience. Yeah.
Do you have any questions right now, Doug? I actually have so many. I don't know what to ask.
I'm kind of fascinated. I fell in love with music first, and then I fell in love with sound and what things create sound. And what I always kind of tell people when I talk to them is that sound and energy in sound is life, like what you're saying in the brain, and how the algorithm or the way that it's connected together, just the connection with how we hear things, how we feel things. I mean, we could sit here and talk about how our brains are manipulated at a rock show. You know what I mean? Just by the energy and all the different stimuli that come with that sound and the visual. That's
Yeah,
fascinating to me.
so I've Mickey Hart, from the Grateful Dead, famous percussionist, we've done some projects together, and he likes to refer to this. He always likes to talk about rhythm. Rhythm is everything. Rhythm, from molecules vibrating to, the orbits of galaxies, of planets, to, our neurons, their electrical activity oscillates rhythmically, that rhythm is fundamental to everything. And sound is another, it's another aspect of that. You have, these frequencies at which, sound or music is represented typically, and understanding, what is the interplay between, for instance, music and rhythm playing in a rhythmic context. The interplay between all of that and our brain function is an interesting question that a lot of people are exploring. And actually, just in the context of pure rhythm, so the motor output, playing a drum, getting in the beat, and then hearing that feedback and having that closed loop between you beating
And
that
our
drum.
brains love it.
And hearing, there's a lot of very interesting research about how doing that at an early age can enhance brain function later in life. How later in life deficits, like people, for instance, who have Alzheimer's, people who have Parkinson's, they can benefit from
treatment, like
from
medical
as a treatment, as a therapy. They can benefit from music and rhythm as a way of tapping into circuits and reactivating them, circuits that have become degenerated through disease. And so there's a very interesting conversation being had in the sciences about this and what the role of music is.
Do you think there would be a way that, like you say, that are reigniting the circuits that diseases may have, degraded? Then I guess you could make the argument that music can even prevent disease.
That is one of the, that's one idea. Absolutely. Nina Kraus is a famous neuroscientist who also studies music's impact on the brain. And she's been looking at, for instance, how music training early in life over a longer period of time can improve brain function, and looking at how people who had music training, how they, for instance, don't experience hearing loss later in life at the rate that others who have not had the musical training do. And, and a lot of this has to do with...
Interesting.
Yeah, so music is, playing in a, say you play in a band or you play in a string quartet or something, there are a lot of demands on the neural system to pick up very subtle changes in pitch, for instance, that matter. Staying in tune matters, And what that is, it forces the brain, the neural timing of the brain, to be very precise. And by doing that systematically over the course of your life, you basically it's kind of like giving the brain a workout, You're improving the precise timing relationships. And those are the things that degrade as you get older.
Yeah.
And what leads to things like difficulty distinguishing like pa versus ba,
Yeah.
You hear it both as the same phoneme. And so this is really interesting work. And
So is it pretty safe to say if you were an active musician and took care of your ears your whole life, that you'd probably be in a better spot with your hearing by the end of your life than if you weren't?
I fundamentally believe that is the case, yes. That engaging, and I think the key is active, that, if you just listen to whatever, Kanye West every day for, 50 years.
Jesus.
You may go the other way around, actually. But
Dear God.
Sorry, Kanye.
No. Don't you apologize to that man.
But, I think, part of it is this is something that research is exploring, to what degree is it the complexity of the music that's required. There was a big debate about whether Mozart, for instance, had some unique impact on the brain. That's been largely discounted, but there is something to be said about classical music that has certain complex structures that put some pressure on the brain, as opposed to, say, just a 4x4 beat and that's all you listen to. But even there, there's the difference between passively listening to music, just consuming it, versus actively listening, where, you're focusing on the music and, thinking about it. And when you're playing music, that is one of the components of it. It's an active creation process. It's not just in the background where you forget about it, And that may make a big difference, actually, in how it impacts the brain.
Interesting.
And also, with music, and I tell people, what is music? Well, music is just sound organized. It's organized sound. You're taking sound, you're organizing it into rhythm, tempo, meter, and all the things, all the tools that we use to organize the sound. And there's multiple ones, and musicians have to be able to do all of that in time, on tempo, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, there's a lot that goes into being a proficient musician, and I've played instruments my whole life, and I wouldn't call myself anything close to what a professional musician does.
I agree with you on that. Not you personally, but people say, "Hey, you're a guitarist." I say, "No, I'm not a guitarist, but I can fake one really well. But I am not a guitarist. I play. I'm confident in saying I'm a drummer, but I certainly can play the guitar, but I'm not a guitarist. I can play the piano, but I'm not a pianist."
Right.
You mentioned Mozart a second ago. Maybe that's a good segue into Mozart and
Mozart and the Mind.
Mozart and the Mind.
Yeah, that's a very an exciting series that we created originally in 2012 is when we first kicked it off, and it's been changing and growing every year. So 2013 was really the first big year for it, and it's one of the series that mainly Mozart puts on. Mainly Mozart's practically an institution here in San Diego. 27 years old, and has been really at the heart of a lot of the classical music scene here in San Diego. So Nancy Letourneau-Boyanek, the executive director, was really interested in kind of branching out a new direction and looking at the interplay between what neuroscientists were looking at in the brain, and and how that could impact health, how that could impact fitness in the brain. The interplay was between that and the host of different disorders and diseases and kind of big social issues.
Yeah.
And so the series basically is a combination of concerts, of presentations that are kind of like little TED Talks that basically take a neuroscientist, for instance, and pair them up with a musician or a composer, and have them give a 45-minute long discussion or conversation or talk together. There's this thing called the Brain Music Exhibition, which I originally envisioned as a sort of an intellectual playground. The idea was that, I as a neuroscientist, have over many years seen the cutting edge of technology and applied it in my work. But a lot of people out there have never had the opportunity to interact with this kind of tech, to see their own brain active in real time, to, create music based on their own emotional state. And then through that, to understand something about what the brain is doing, So the expo is designed to bring together artists, and I mean, I've designed a lot of the installations in this myself as an artist, but it's to really bring together, artists and scientists and composers and, ethnomusicologists and people who all have something to contribute and build interactive installations.
Right, yeah, create a forum for everybody to get together and do something.
Yeah,
cool.
Exactly. And so those are the three components.
So you're very heavily involved in that. You did some stuff with that. Was that last year?
That was last year as well. And
okay.
Yep. So it's 2013.
Oh, so
2014.
You've done it for quite
every
a while.
Year.
Okay.
Yep. And this year it will be in September at the UCSC campus.
Great.
It's sort of a festival of sorts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up in San Diego, so I missed out on a lot of this stuff, but a few of my friends have been talking about it since I mentioned it.
Well, it's it's a new and not yet totally broadcasted out there thing. So it's but it's exciting to see people showing up and checking it out.
What did you do there last year?
Last year we had an interesting combo of we had talks focusing on music therapy. Basically, we had Conchetta Tamaino, who's who's very, very well known in the music therapy domain. She's really one of the pioneers of the entire field, and she was talking about just her decades of work in this area, how she uses music as a tool for rehabilitation, for therapy, for helping people get through difficult phases in their life, but also for things like Parkinson's, and how you can help a patient walk again by moving to the beat, things like that, right?
Oh,
so
cool.
she was talking about that. We had Mickey Hart down from the Grateful Dead. We had a 700 person sort of drum circle, or Mickey likes to call them rhythm circles, with Christine Stevens.
I looked that up. I watched.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, and that was pretty mind blowing. I thought it was pretty mind blowing.
Could you could you explain a little bit real quickly what happened there? What that was about?
Yeah, it was like hippie technology.
Okay.
It's like if you took Golden Gate Park 1960s and threw it 100 years into the future, it might be something like that.
Okay, cool.
So what we were doing is we were measuring Mickey's brain activity using state-of-the-art EEG imaging or biosensing hardware by a company called Cognionics here in San Diego. And
that thing he was wearing, he
was wearing this, yeah.
A brain-computer
wireless
interface?
Exactly.
BCMI.
And then we use software that myself and another neuroscientist, Christian Kothe, have developed that decodes those brain states. So we take the activity out of the brain, and then we model all the little, like I was talking about, conversation, like there's all these little conversations happening in the brain, all these neurons chattering.
Right.
We were recording that activity throughout the entire brain. We were trying to reconstruct all those voices and then look at how information was flowing between different brain areas.
Okay.
So looking at networks.
Were you doing this in real time?
All in real time. This has never really been done before. I mean, we'd done a performance of this just slightly before, but this is all very new. Yeah.
So were you broadcasting imagery of what was going on in his brain?
Exactly. So what we did is we were decoding the brain activity, and then we had 2 virtual reality components. So we were using Oculus Rift, and we had partnered up with Oculus in some earlier stages of this, and NVIDIA was supporting with hardware. And what we were doing is Mickey was in a virtual world where what he was interacting with was a game called Neurodrummer, and this was designed by Matt Whitman at Studio B. Yeah, it was cool. So Matt is like a Oculus guru, and he develops games to operate in VR. You know, and what this game was, it was like Mickey's sitting there, and he's a skeleton. Basically, he looks down at his body. He's a skeleton. He sees his heart, his veins. You know, he's
on stage.
Yep.
I'm just going to describe this. He's on stage. He's wearing the BCI. He's puts on the Oculus. He's got a drum in front of him, right?
Exactly. He's got a drum in front of him.
Right. And is there? So he's got all this stuff on, and then there's a visualization of what he's seeing.
And there's a visualization of what's happening in his brain as he's engaging in this virtual reality environment, creating music, creating sounds, and then I'm flying through his brain in virtual reality. So it's kind of like a Russian nested doll thing.
Yeah,
so Mickey's in virtual world A. I'm in Mickey's brain in virtual reality.
Actually, I don't know if I'd want to be in Mickey's brain.
It was a remarkably good shape. Actually,
I don't know if I would want to be in Mickey's brain, or I really, really, really would put him like at the top of the list of people's brains I wanted to be inside of. Actually,
yeah. So it was, it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And this was preceded by a talk by.
Man, that is so incredible.
This was preceded by a little talk by Adam Gazzaley, who's a great neuroscientist, good friend, and had really put together a consortium to try to kick this thing off. And that was all about rhythm in the brain and rhythm in music. So we were closing the loop between all the rhythms that Mickey was playing and all these rhythms that the brain is producing, and we were visualizing all of that, and it was cool.
So he was playing rhythms.
Yep.
And you were decoding them in real time.
I was decoding his brain state as he's playing these rhythms. I'm decoding the activity in his brain, visualizing it in virtual reality, a big 3D model of his brain, flying through it. And then the audience was seeing all of this, and they were then playing along on drums. Remo donated like a ton of little drum sets.
Yeah.
And so all the audience members had a little drum kit, little shapers and stuff, and they were just pounding away, and we just had a big old rhythm circle. I think there was a rain dance in there somewhere, too.
Big old giant drum circle. So you have a drum circle going on with virtual reality and BCI and an Oculus Rift. Wow, that's quite a combination of things.
And Mickey Hart at the center,
Mickey Hart at the center. Who better to have at the center?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. And I'm trying. So I didn't catch this on the video because I had just pulled this up before you got here, so I didn't get that far trying to watch it. But I'm trying to visualize, trying to understand what was up on that screen. There's a picture of his brain.
Yep.
Obviously,
that is his brain. Literally, it's actually his brain. It's a full 3D model.
So you made a 3D model of
around
his
it,
brain.
outside it, his brain, exactly.
Not a brain, his brain.
So what we did is we took him to Adam Gazzaley's lab, and Adam has access to some of the best MRI machines, magnetic resonance imaging machines, and so we did is a brain scan. So we actually then we 3D reconstructed the surface of his brain, and also all the fiber tracks, the little like the wires that connect up different areas of the brain, and so we had that as the skeleton. Think of it as the skeleton of the brain, but it needed to be populated with activity. And so then my model was going and then actually modeling all the dynamics, how information flowed and all that, and putting it into that model.
What was the visualization of that? So you see, so on the screen we see his brain, crazy brain.
Yep.
And then you're seeing
pulses of
activity?
light, activity. So what you saw was like flashes of light happening on the surface of the brain. That was activity in his brain that we had inferred using these sensors. So we had inferred the activity and where it was coming from in the brain in real time. So you saw bursts of activity, propagating ripples, interesting stuff like that. That was all statistically modeling his actual activity. And then you saw pulses of light flashing along these fiber tracks, these wires, and that was modeling the information transfer using a very powerful statistical model, very state-of-the-art stuff. And so you were kind of getting a sense of where the activity was and who was talking to who in his brain, what parts of the brain were communicating all in real time.
So I've seen a little bit of this already. Is this kind of making sense to you, what we're saying here? What this looks like? Can you imagine this? On a stage,
I'm thinking like lightning,
there's
lightning in the clouds, and it's just like crawls across.
Kind of like that,
like electrical charges.
Absolutely.
But in real time, and that's really it's a visualization of really what's happening.
That's why it's just going.
While
that's why
he's
I was
playing
asking
the
about
drums.
processing.
Yeah.
Like what? How does that? Yeah. How
cool is that?
This was an example where it required very powerful computers to carry this out. But since then, like my company, we do all this stuff on the cloud. So now you can do that on your cell phone. You can fly in VR on a cell phone, through your own brain. And the processing is, you could be on a beach in your underwear and, flying through your brain if you wanted to be.
Wow, I totally want to do that.
Dude, people would pay.
I want to do that
Like,
specific thing.
Where do I get a ticket for that ride?
I want to be
Come to
on a
Mozart
beach
and
in
Mind.
my underwear, flying through my brain.
Yep.
I don't think I've done that yet.
And,
Okay.
I cannot
more to the
convey.
list.
Virtual reality is a very cool medium. I first encountered virtual reality when I was living in Brazil back in the 90s, and it blew me away. Playing Doom, that classic game, best game. Not the best for VR necessarily, given that it's sort of a 2D, 3D kind of thing. But it blew me away, the possibilities. And then VR just kind of disappeared for years and years.
Yeah.
Right? Now it's coming back again.
Why is it just now coming back? Is it just now we're just kind of able to get latencies down and get things to where they need to be?
A lot of it has to do with that, like
Computing
getting
power,
that
right?
computing power. Getting the cost down sufficiently to make it affordable for a consumer and not just for kind of a high end research or art. But I'm sure there are a lot more factors that go into why a technology that
of course
has been around for so long and never fully matured until
yeah.
now. This is happening.
Yeah,
in
it just
many
kind of
other areas.
hit the tipping point maybe right about now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I demoed the Oculus. I think the more recent one a couple months ago, and first time I'd ever tried anything like that in a long time, and it was amazing. Completely blew my mind. Got sick, but that's okay.
That's the thing. See,
Yeah.
that's one of the things too that's still a challenge. How do you
yeah.
prevent nausea? And this was something that, for instance, was addressed in Neurodrummer, Matt Whitman's piece for what we did with Mickey Hart. He's thought a lot about these things. How do you move through the space so that you don't build up expectations that are violated? The problem is that we're used to moving in the real world with real physics. Imagine in VR world, I'm being hurled down a track at 100 miles an hour and I come to an abrupt stop.
Like being in a dream.
Yeah, my body's expecting though to feel it, and when you don't, it says
makes you
what
go,
the F,
whoa.
Yeah,
So crazy.
It gets very confused, and so imagine this happening all the time. You're moving, you're running, you're expecting to feel the forces of the world on you, but you don't, and that disconnect is one source of nausea.
Can you train yourself out of that nausea? Can say the more you do it, the more you kind of get used to it, the more it works
you should
out?
ask people at Edwards Air Force Base about that.
I was just
going
going to
to
say,
this with pilots.
we used to do ship driving
Yeah.
in simulators.
Yeah.
So
And that's where a lot of the
they
original
simulate
research.
the ocean, and you simulate bringing a ship alongside another ship and mooring and docking and getting underway and things like that. Like, I used to sit in there. Yeah, you feel like the ship's moving. The trainer's not moving at all, but your brain sees the video screen. And you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's very confusing.
Yeah, there's a lot of the early research on virtual reality-induced motion sickness was done by the military.
Makes sense.
Because of the simulators.
And they have the
trying to-
means to get it done.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
So
They're always
right.
first.
But, the thing I want to say is I cannot convey the scale of being, so for instance, in this brain, you see it on a screen and it's, whatever. We had it on a big wall, so it's maybe, 30 feet tall. But in, and that even you're far away, it looks like, okay, cool brain.
yeah.
In VR, when you're in, say, Mickey's brain, it's like a 30-story building, and it's around you. It's everywhere. You're hearing it. We had the guys from LucasArts design the sound for it.
Yeah.
And as you hear this, the pulses of sound,
That's
and it's
awesome.
it's a totally different experience
Yeah.
because it's so big and it's so much there.
Yeah.
There's all that presence.
Wow,
So
that's
it's cool.
incredible.
I've put it on people and they've some of them have cried. Because
Really?
it's that novelty.
It's so
of the
immersive and
experience.
just
It's just people react to VR in totally different ways, but for everyone, it's impactful in some way.
yeah.
And then you get sick.
And then you get sick. Well, for me, it was kind of like, and again, this is just a few months ago, and I haven't been completely keeping up with it, so there might be a new generation of this technology out and about, but I was completely blown away by it and thinking, oh, well, okay, this is here now, so this is totally going to happen or is happening right now. We're there.
Yeah.
I kind of assumed that my illness was something that was just because it's something I haven't experienced much, or I could just see like if a kid starts goofing around with this stuff when he's a little kid,
Yeah.
and then he's
Yeah.
lived with it for his life, maybe it's not as big of an issue or whatever. But
That's a good question. But then if you did constantly, I was talking to my brother about this. He's
Yeah.
he's a creative director at Buck LA, and they actually just finished doing a VR piece at F5, which is a big motion graphics conference. So we were talking about exactly this and talking about what would happen in the future if we lived fair percentage of our time in VR, where we don't have the feedback anymore. Well, one thing that the brain does is when it doesn't receive inputs for a while, it stops using those sensors. So the parts of your brain, really the nerves that are responsible for sensing, if they never feel anything, they start to die. Or they stop sending signals at some point.
Right.
And, it's the brain's way of sort of conserving, energy in some way.
Refocusing its resources.
Refocusing its resources.
Yeah.
And this happens like with motor output. If you don't use your actual arm,
Like working out.
the cells will start to die, literally. And at some point, you won't be able to move your arm. And so, there's an interesting question. If you put a VR system on a kid at a young age, and they spend 8 hours a day in VR world, we don't know what the impact would be on your actual nervous system, but I can guarantee it's not
Probably
necessarily
not
going to
positive.
be great
Yeah.
for your daily life.
Yeah. Do you think we are going to be living that way in the future?
Do you know the
I
book
know, it's
Ready
a
Player
pretty-
One? Have you read this book?
No, no.
You got to read it. So it's a great book.
Who's it by?
Ernest Cline. If you guys are into like 1980s pop culture,
Love it.
Okay, so this digs into Atari and the early gaming, the kind of trends and music, all that stuff, but now
Cool.
throw it into the future in a dystopian world.
All right.
VR.
So that may
80s
be where we're headed.
Culture, Easter eggs.
Well,
Hopefully
and what
not.
you're talking about with the VR is like
That's
it kind of breaks the rules of physics because you said object in motion stays in motion, right? That's the rules of physics. One of Newton's
One of
laws,
them,
right?
yeah.
So that goes, and it's not just like an object, like I throw a ball. Like that's just an example. Our bodies, like you just said, if your arm doesn't move, the cells die and it becomes useless, right? Well, what you're saying with VR is you're breaking that because you're in motion, but you're really not in motion.
Yeah, so your brain
thinks
your
you're in
brain
motion,
thinks you're in motion, and
but
it's
your
the
body's
eyes
not.
are telling you. It's really the eyes. The eyes are telling you, "Hey, man, you're in motion," but your vestibular system, the part of your brain responsible for balance, and it's saying, "No, I'm not moving. I'm not tilted. I'm not doing stuff." Your peripheral nerves are saying, "Hey, I'm sitting down." So all of this produces a mismatch.
Yeah.
and
We're just talking about motion sickness here, like same reason people get sick in a car, right?
That's
You just
right.
Think,
Yeah, I mean, but there's a lot of debate about that even. Is it
Okay.
the same kind of motion sickness? But yes, that is one theory, that it's
General.
exactly the same kind of thing that produces motion sickness in a car or on a ship.
Wow,
Yeah.
that is so cool.
Pretty
I am
awesome,
so fascinated with the future of music production in VR and apparently BCI now as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you take the two and put them together, there's all kinds of interesting possibilities that you
Nuts.
can do.
Absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
Do you have? I mean, so you've obviously done some stuff like this. What are some of the things you kind of have in the pipe right now for projects and?
Oh, wow.
Any
yeah,
fun
there's,
stuff?
There's a few cool things. So Alvin Lucier was the first guy to really create a brain-computer music interface. But then that was pretty much his last attempt at it. He did it. That was it. He didn't
What
do
year
anything
was
more
that
in
again?
that space. 1965.
Okay.
David Rosenboom picked up right around that time, and then in the late 1960s. 1967 was probably his first piece, I think. And he really pushed this forward. This was a time when biofeedback was starting to become pretty cool. Artists were really the ones taking the lead on a lot of that. For instance, John Lennon was really into biofeedback. He and Yoko Ono. And they did pieces with David Rosenboom using brain activity to sonifying John and Yoko's brain activity.
I think I remember.
Yeah, exactly. And so what David was
about
really
some of this
interested in as an experimental musician, really a pioneer in experimental music, was how can we take these signals from the brain and produce cool musical experiences from that? So David and I have done more recently, we did some pieces together, which is really cool. And we created this piece called Ringing Minds. I think it's super cool. A lot of the pieces that I've done, that other people have done in the past, they are for one performer. So you have one guy's brain, you're playing his brain, But Ringing Minds is designed for multiple brains. It's designed for, in this case, 4 or 5 or 8 brains. And you are recording, imagine you have an audience listening to a performance, and you put headsets on those audience members. And now the way in which we wanted to kind of think about this was, as musical events happen, the audience's brains will respond to those events and generate changes. And if all the audience members are kind of in the same state, their brains will generate sort of different versions of the same brain response to that musical event. Okay. And we can then build a model that picks up on that sameness of the response and then sonifies it. And so what we created with David was something like a sonic lake. Imagine you have like a lake that you're throwing stones into of different sizes, and they ripple out and propagate out at different frequencies, as they hit the water. Okay, that lake is, it's a sound lake. And the stones being thrown in are musical events happening, hitting a drum, a note on a violin. And then the rippling is the brain responding to it, and we're picking that signal up and then making it, sonifying it. David built an instrument, so you kind of hear the brain resonating.
Yeah, so
cool.
David built an instrument
David
to translate
built an
this.
instrument. Exactly, yeah. He built this big resonator bank, a digital instrument, and I built the brain-computer music interface, and we're performing this at the the Whitney Museum of American Art, which is reopening in downtown Manhattan, 1st of May, and we're the first major concert to be had there.
Oh, so when will you be there?
It's actually a 3-day retrospective of David's work over the last 50 years. So it's 3 days, May 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, and we're performing on the 23rd.
Okay, so right around the corner.
Yeah, it's just
From
around the
when we're
corner.
recording
We were just up there,
We'll try
not
to
in
get this out
New
in the
York,
world.
but at Cal Arts, where David is rehearsing. last week.
That's cool,
So,
man.
yeah.
Is there a visual component to this or no?
We're actually thinking about building one, but it was purely sonic. We performed this once before in Mozart and The Mind, actually last year. And we originally envisioned it to be purely sonic. It uses surround sound, spatialization, so you're actually hearing the sound coming from different places.
Right.
But there was no visual component.
That touches on an interesting point. One of the reasons that I opted for this project that I'm doing here, this podcast, as a podcast, was because I wanted no visual component to it. That was actually a prime kind of goal of mine in this whole project, because not having the visual component to this makes it really timeless and forces the listener to create their own visuals, obviously.
Yeah.
Wow, man. That I like the idea of no visual, I have to say. But then again, you're talking about creating visuals
In your head?
in your head, kind of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I see music as, to me,
This
it's
is
very
very
visual.
Inception-esque to me right now.
Yeah. Well, it's this touches on another really interesting concept, and this is actually the title of David Rosenboom's retrospective. It's called Propositional Music, and this is a theme that David has expounded on for a number of years, and the thesis, the idea behind this concept, propositional music, is that we are constantly creating reality. Okay, we're not passively receiving the world. We generate a model of the world. And then information comes in, and if that information matches the model, then it reinforces it, and it reinforces what we already believe. And if it doesn't, we usually throw it away, So this is why it's hard to change people's beliefs about things. But in music, you can see it in the same way, that when you listen to music, you're not receiving the music that the composer has produced, and you're just consuming it as as he intended it. You're generating the music in your head in some ways. The sound waves hit your ears and they're meaningless at that point. In your brain, you put the structure together in some ways.
Your brain
you
turns that
create
into
meaning out of it. And out of that comes the emotion and the everything that makes music what it is to us. But a lot of that has to do with actively listening, and actively constructing this world in your head. But that that is very Inception-like, though. This idea that we don't receive the world, we create the world in our heads,
right?
And we receive a teeny bit of reality through our senses. There's an immense amount there that we don't even directly receive, and we kind of infer it.
Yeah.
Totally abstract things.
You're
we have
building
no
it all
access to.
yourself, right?
Building in our heads. Yeah.
Is there a commercially available instrument that I can create
For
or make kind of
brain-computer music interfaces?
brain-computer music interfaces?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is sort of home-built stuff.
Yeah, there's nobody out there that's really commercially released
nobody's really
system.
doing a BCMI that's commercially available. However, you can buy hardware, and now software is increasingly available. It makes it like you can take Max MSP or something and wire it up to a, an emotive or cognionics, EEG sensor and do some cool stuff. Yeah, actually, well, I could give a little plug for my own company because we build software that makes it very, very easy for you as, say, a musician, having no understanding about how the brain works. What you can do is you can take EEG system, take our software, and our software will handle all the decoding of the brain states. And then you just ask the software, give me the emotional state of the person, or give me how attentive they are.
How accurate is,
Right. Well, the accuracy is what, that is the thing that is constantly improving. And right now, I would say that it depends a lot on a lot of factors that I could spend 40 minutes going into, but
I'm sure.
But one of the simplest issues is just the amount of noise on the sensor and where your electrodes are placed on the brain and how sophisticated that sensor
Does a millimeter make a difference? Like if that sensor's
no,
there?
Not a millimeter, but inches can matter,
Okay.
and noise matters.
Yeah.
But the idea is,
like other brain noise or just
Like outside,
everything?
like electrical noise,
Electrical noise in general.
For instance, line noise, which you get in your audio equipment and have to cancel out, or other sources of noise. Like when I clench my muscles, it generates a lot of electrical activity.
Yeah,
it's huge in magnitude
muscles,
compared to what the brain generates.
Really? Okay.
Huge. It dwarfs it. And you got to get rid of that stuff if you want to know what the brain's doing. When I blink, it generates huge electrical discharges. So that your eyeball is like a little battery, and it's actually rotating back in your head, and that produces a big.
Are we kind
discharge.
of right now? We're making some pretty solid. You're making some progress, or we're, I don't know, making some progress in terms of how to translate this stuff into emotions.
Yeah. I mean, it's all accelerating. I think this domain, neuroscience, is. We talk about things like exponential trends, and a classic one is in computer science is Moore's law, which is basically the density of transistors doubles every year, and so so that's one example of an exponential curve. We see that in many other areas, part of it driven by computing, and in neuroscience we're definitely on an exponential trend right now in terms of our understanding of the brain, and in sensing, like I was mentioning earlier, cheap lightweight sensors. They're just becoming increasingly more available at a lower price point, so that makes it possible to do cool new things as an artist. But the key thing is, it's coming down to this issue of how do you take a sensor and then get something meaningful out of it that you could then use as an artist,
Right.
And so, that's where
That's
the software
the bottom
matters.
line right there. Right?
Exactly.
So let's first say I was in a rock band and I wanted to wear some sensors on my head during a show, and I want some graphics to show up on a screen. How hard would that be to make happen?
Well,
doesn't have to be abstract as cool,
Yeah. Well, if you used the software that we're about to be putting out, it would take you about 15 minutes to build that or less.
And how much did it cost?
Well, actually, for artists, it will be free. There's a free version, a community edition. Yeah, go to our website. But
Check that out.
yeah, no, well, our company's name's Synergy, so you can go to synergy.com and you'll see all kinds of stuff about it. But it is, we live in this kind of culture of hackers and makers and people who just want to do cool things. And a
Myself
lot of them are
included.
artists. Yeah, me too. I mean,
I'm
one
so
of them,
into it, man. So into it.
Yeah.
Part of the motivation for getting you down here, dragging you down here, was to
Yeah,
come up with ideas on things I could do.
No, it's a really I think it's a very fundamental thing, and people like to say it's a fundamental American thing, the American entrepreneurship or whatever. But I think it's just a fundamentally human thing.
Yeah, I think I would
humans
go with
like
that too.
to create.
Yeah.
We build in our heads and out in the real world. That's what we do. So. We're all about giving people the tools to do that, and increasingly you see that. You see so many cool apps.
What do you think the next 10 years holds for BCMI?
Oh gosh,
can you answer that?
Yeah,
at this point?
I think the sky is the limit in as much as for neuroscience, the sky's the limit. In 10 years, it's hard to predict where we'll be in terms of understanding what the signals in the brain mean. But every advance there is an advance in BCMI, in artistic expression. So if I could today, let's say, I can get a very fuzzy estimate of what your emotional state is. In 10 or 30 years, I may be able to have a much more precise estimate. And imagine that I could distinguish very subtle emotions. What could I do musically? Now I could have a track that composes itself for you to make you feel a certain way.
That's awesome.
And then uses algorithmic music and remixes itself. And,
yes, that is so amazing.
I designed an installation called Mood
I'm
Mixer
feeling
that
sad
does
right
that.
now. Create some sad music for me instantly.
Yep.
That's completely original, and
that's the idea.
that's so cool.
And I had an installation. There was this project called Mood Mixer I've designed with Grace Leslie, who's also an experimental music person. And it over the years, it's touched on this topic. How do you record emotional states or brain states and then use that to dynamically compose music that matches your state? And now take a bunch of people and do it together. So now imagine you're composing music for not just your state, but it's like the crowd,
the audience state. Yeah.
And so it's like you and 10 other people.
I love the idea
kind of together making the music.
I love the idea of having everybody networked in and having a jam like that,
Absolutely.
man. Just live musicians playing.
Yep.
Everybody could kind of link up emotionally. I mean, it just seems amazing.
You could do it over the internet if you wanted to.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I could tell you about one more piece that was pretty cool.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this one's cool. This was again with Richard Warp, and it was a piece that we called Music for Online Performer. It was an homage to Alvin Lucier. It was on his birthday, actually, an anniversary. I think it was 50-year anniversary or something. Or is it of his piece? Maybe it was his original piece. But what we did is we had me sitting in San Diego, and I was decoding 4 different brain states. And then those are getting routed across the Atlantic to a series of robots in a concert hall. They were like disembodied.
I'm shaking my head.
Playing, playing violin, playing percussive instruments and chimes, and they were using
Brian would
Arduino.
love to be here right now.
That's dude.
Sorry,
You
I had to
read
tell
my
Doug, our
mind,
friend
man.
Brian.
And
he said robots in Atlantic, and I was like,
robots.
God, corner
Over the
Brain
internet,
control
controlled
robots.
by.
Sorry, buddy.
And now this was getting routed back. So now there were cameras there on all the locations, on my location, that location. And the signals were then getting routed back up the sound, back to me and to a composer in San Francisco, Richard Warp. And what Richard was, he was a conductor. He was conducting the thing. And so what he was doing was he was sending me instructions through a computer program, like, think about moving your right arm, relax, think about moving your left leg. And as I did that, the different patterns would be decoded and activate the different robots. But there was now an internet crowd that was on buses in Berlin and, at home in New York and whatever, who were all on live stream watching this 4-camera concert unfolding and then interacting with him in a chat room, directing him to direct me.
Wow.
And so there are all these loops and levels of filtering. So he could choose at any time to either accept the audience's input or not. And then I could choose to either accept his directive or not. And then the robots had to do whatever I told them.
Hopefully the robots always get screwed, dude.
Robots are temperamental beasts.
For the time being.
Until I break down, and then I don't have to listen to you.
They do whatever they want.
Yeah. They're not autonomous yet.
Yeah.
Terminator.
So, there's so much cool stuff you can do. And, with the internet, it's limitless. The time, space, those classic boundaries that existed previously are really not so much there anymore for performance art.
I'm fascinated by, and I've said this a couple times already in the podcast, I'm fascinated by what the future holds for music consumption. It's just amazing to me right now. I think we haven't seen an evolution in that in a really long time. The only evolution I've seen of that in my lifetime was probably the music video. Widely accepted evolution is probably the music video, and I just feel we're way overdue for the next thing at this point. And somebody might argue, well, the internet changed how you experience music. I don't think so.
No,
actually,
not what you're talking
because
about.
I'm talking about
adding another medium, like
he's
a physical medium. You're talking about a visual
another
medium.
sense to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Adding more senses to it, I guess.
That's right. Yeah.
Sensory
Emotions,
experience.
like you're saying, emotional responses.
The internet has just really created a new delivery platform.
That's right.
I suppose.
In many ways, yeah. But it has changed some aspects of this, like the idea that you can have distributed concerts with people all around the world, jamming together, in real time. This is something that you couldn't have done before the internet.
I guess, that's why I kind of backed up and said widely.
Exactly. It is a delivery platform, and it does change the rules. But the other thing to me that's really fascinating goes dialing back to that original thing about human-computer interaction, my original passion. To me, that is one of the things that in music I think is really is on the cusp of a revolution. Is the way in which media is consumed as an interactive experience, where it's kind of like, what was that? Choose your own story, or
Choose your own adventure.
Choose your own adventure.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, it's the title of one of David's pieces at this retrospect, something like that.
Okay.
Choose your own universe. Yeah.
All right.
But that idea that music doesn't have to be this static thing that is written and then delivered. It can be an organic thing that is changing based on who listens to it and based on how they interact with it, And in the experimental arts, that's been explored for a number of years, but, it's really with the dawn of computing power, the ability to have advanced machine learning techniques that can do computation and figure out new paths, based on the state of a person and based on what they're doing and the new sensors. Now it's all possible. I
love the artist in me loves the idea of being able to create a piece of art, a musical piece of art that morphs for the end listener.
The listener,
That'd be just the most amazing thing within my parameters, like my control. It's like still something unique that I created. I don't know. It seems like that'd be great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's super exciting and transformative, and music is such a fundamental medium for communication. I mean, something that humans have had since the dawn of history, for sure. I mean, it probably predates most other forms of cultural communication, and we still haven't figured out why we have hung on to it evolutionarily. So there must be doing something useful, because it hasn't been weeded out, and if nothing else, it's getting stronger and more interesting and complex. But music really is one of those few artistic forms, I think, that taps into so many levels of the brain and body and has so much potential. So it's cool.
Are there some ideas on why it's so deeply rooted in our?
Oh, there are a lot of theories about this. I would just, instead of trying to paraphrase the great scientists on this, I would say for any of the listeners to read like Ani Patel's book on the topic, for instance. And he writes wonderfully about this and the neurobiology of music. And there are a number of other authors that one can consult. But
what would be a good start?
Yeah, well, I think Ani's books are are a great start to that. So that's a very accessible, very good introduction, and really also looking at not just the the cultural elements, but also the neurobiology of it, and also what is it a uniquely human thing? That's what he's studied. Is this something that animals have, for instance? What animals might have it? And so there's the famous dancing parrot. Ani Patel and John Everson.
Do animals like music?
Well, that's an open question.
Okay, so we haven't figured that one out yet.
But for what we know, most animals don't seem to have anything like human music. But there are a few that do exhibit some traits like that, like for instance, dancing and moving rhythmically, being able to do that. So those are all very interesting questions. But yeah.
So we spoke a little bit about Mozart and the Mind. What's to come next? Where are we at with that?
Yeah, well, this year is going to be pretty exciting, and we're focusing on a kind of a new multi-year plan that I can't totally articulate right now, but mainly Mozart's got a really interesting plan. And this year we're going to focus on some interesting aspects of things like prodigy, for instance. What is prodigy?
Okay.
What is genius, and is it something that is just in your genes, or is it something that can be learned, or, what's hard work versus just innate talent? And we're going to be exploring that from a bunch of different facets this year, and looking at prodigies themselves, having them come and perform, young child prodigies, and also former prodigies, adults. There's going to be a cool performance at Mozart and the Mind this year by a great composer, Eduardo Miranda, and what he's going to be doing is it's a piece in the style of Mozart, where a quartet will be playing these pieces that are dynamically rearranged. They kind of sound like snippets of Mozart, but they're dynamically rearranged based on the brain states of 4 people. And so it's kind of a hybrid human brain, octet.
Wow.
And so that's going to be pretty cool.
Do you have a date for this yet or no?
Yeah, this is going to be,
I know it's a little ways off.
the weekend of September 25th.
Here in San Diego?
Here in San Diego at the Qualcomm Institute. at UC San Diego.
At UC San Diego.
That's
so it's
right.
on
Yeah,
campus.
Cal IT.
Is it something that anybody can go to?
Yeah, anyone
Doesn't
can
have to
go
be a student. It doesn't. It could.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Is
I
there
mean,
are
there
there
are
tickets?
very affordable pricing structures
Okay,
for,
so there's
for
tickets.
students. We encourage anyone to attend, and there'll be definitely a low price point to make it accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
But we'll also have exhibitions there and some very cool interactive installations, some VR stuff. most
I'll be there.
likely. So yeah,
I'll be there for sure.
you should come by.
Wow. Well, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast. I know you're an extremely busy dude, so just having
we
you
all
swing
are.
down. Yeah, that's true. Having you swing down here is certainly appreciated, and it's just been a pleasure having
It's
you.
been great. It's always a pleasure. So
Yeah,
it's
well,
nice to
thanks a
be here.
lot.
Yeah,
Signing off.
cool.
That was the end. I went back just before I coughed. It fades out.
I'll note here, faded cough.